there have been discussions between Steve Witkoff, the president's envoy on this issue, and his counterpart and counterparts in the Russian government. So we have a pretty good idea of the genesis of this specific 28-point plan. But the basic idea of this plan has been on the table for a number of years, but it hasn't been agreed by the United States beforehand. In other words, the framework for reaching peace in Ukraine has been clear for a long time. There actually was a peace agreement nearly signed between Russia and Ukraine in April 2022. And the United States rushed in, this is during the Biden administration, and told the Ukrainians, don't sign, keep fighting. What that agreement in April 2022 said was basically that Ukraine would be neutral and that NATO would not enlarge to Ukraine. And that was the main issue of this war all along. And that in that context, there could be some territorial changes, maybe de facto, in other words, an agreement that fighting would stop, even if one side or the other didn't accept exactly the territories whose possession would be recognized by the cease of the fighting. In other words, the basic framework for making peace is that Ukraine should be neutral, that it should not be a NATO country. And in that context, after 10 years of war, this has been going on basically since 2014, territories have changed and the fighting would stop and the change of territory would be recognized in a de facto manner. Now, again, the 28-point plan that we've read about in the press states these points pretty straightforwardly, and therefore they're a basis for this war to end. All the warmongers in the United States and in Europe are jumping up and down, saying no, Ukraine should keep fighting, keep losing people, keep suffering territorial losses. And so this warmongering that has been preventing a peace agreement for many years just puts Ukraine in a worse and worse situation. But we haven't had a resolution of the war because we have a lot of warmongers around. They are in the interest of Ukraine. They are in the collective security interest of all of the parties, in fact. And that if Zelensky, who is basically a dictator, he rules by martial law, he does not have the backing of the Ukrainian people in any sense who want this war to end. But if the Ukrainian political leadership says they're going to keep on fighting, I hope at least the United States says you're on your own. That's it. No more weapons, no more funding, no more support. You're on your own. Because if Ukraine rejects a peace that is in their interest at a time when they are losing on the battlefield, what's the United States to do? It should not force them to accept, but it should say, you're on your own. And that, if Trump has any consistency, which is not to be the case, but if he does have any consistency, that would be the right thing to do. The right thing to do from the point of view of America's interests, actually the right thing to do from the point of view of Ukraine's real interest, that it's not going to support a continued war. Russia doesn't really fear Ukraine. Russia doesn't want the United States on its border. I don't know exactly what line the Russians would or would not agree to, but the basic cause of this war is that back in the 1990s, actually the early 1990s, when the Soviet Union ended and Russia and Ukraine and the other parts of the Soviet Union became independent states, the United States under Clinton already decided that the U.S. military alliance would expand eastward to Russia's border. These are decisions that go back 30 years. The Russians said that would be a grave national security threat to us, and have said that for more than 30 years. The United States ignored that all through this period. Eventually, a war broke out 11 years ago in 2014 over this issue. Until today, the official position of the NATO alliance is that NATO will expand to Ukraine. Trump has said privately and in this document that NATO won't expand to Ukraine. That's how the war could end. But the Europeans are still jumping up and down saying NATO will expand when NATO wants to. And hardliners in the United States say the same thing. And so the basic cause of this war, which goes back 30 years, remains on the table till today. Donald Trump has not proven to be a strong and consequent leader, so he wavers whenever he has objections, even within his own government. Marco Rubio is clearly a much greater hardliner on this issue. Trump doesn't like that kind of opposition, and he's easily pushed over. Whether he will be again is, I guess, a basic question that we're facing. Not be consistent, but to do what America wants. That's the whole principle of the NATO enlargement from the start. The idea is we're the world's sole superpower. We go where we want, we go when we want, we go how we want. We don't have to explain. We don't have to be consistent. There's no golden rule for the American empire. We have had the Monroe Doctrine for more than 2 centuries. Don't come close to us from the outside. No European power should encroach in our hemisphere. But we have always reserved the right to go bother anyone anywhere in the world that we want to.
Right.
So consistency has never been the point, but that gets us into endless wars. We're not as all-powerful as these Washington politicians or the CIA or others like to think. We now have been dragged into this awful war by this warmongering approach of the United States that says we do what we want. We don't have to listen to anyone else's interests. And it doesn't work. It doesn't serve the American interests. That's supposedly what Donald Trump said when he said that he's going to follow the U.S. interest. Well, the U.S. interest has nothing to do with NATO expanding to Russia's borders and thereby embroiling the United States in a absolutely disastrous and futile war that is of such importance for Russia that it's going to prevail in the end. And that's what the 28-point peace plan says. Let's stop this war. NATO won't enlarge. And that's what has the warmongers jumping up and down. They don't want to acknowledge the basic fact that we are not all powerful and that we can't do to others what we would not have them do to us. This is the essence of this war, and it has been the essence of this war for the 11 years of this war. He's worried about dignity or losing the partner, the United States. What about the estimated 2 million Ukrainians who have died or been gravely wounded in this absolutely disastrous and futile and unnecessary war? I find Zelensky absolutely terrible and have found him such for years. Delusional or for whatever reason, not counting the terrible, unbelievable costs to his own countrymen, not representing them. And till this day, I find the decisions absolutely awful. He is ruling by decree. He is ruling over and part of a massive, massive corruption scandal. So was a lot of money being made on this war by Zelensky and his henchmen. There's nothing admirable about this agony that he's expressing. If he were a serious and consequent and honest leader, the war would end. Borders are inviolable until Europe and the United States decide they're not inviolable. Back in the end of the 1990s, the U.S. and Europe bombed Serbia for 78 days to break that country in two. And the breakaway part, Kosovo, that is a border change of this supposedly inviolable borders of Europe, that country, or that breakaway part was then recognized as a nation by the European countries, and NATO put its largest military base in southeastern Europe in that breakaway place. And so these statements are vacuous. Borders can't change except when we want to change them. Van der Leyen has not engaged in any diplomacy. The European Union has not engaged in any diplomacy with Russia whatsoever. They've had no direct talks. They don't believe in diplomacy. There is a slight nuance that should be noted, though. When she talked about Ukraine gets the right to choose, nobody, including Russia or the U.S. in this 28-point plan or anybody else, has denied Ukraine's right to become part of the European Union. In fact, this is an issue about military alliances, and this is an issue about NATO, that is the U.S.-led alliance in Ukraine. So Van der Leyen didn't quite say that NATO would be part of Ukraine. There's no clarity in her words. It's empty rhetoric. For all of the boasting and all the rest is a very weak leader. He's a very weak person because his views change by the hour or by the day, depending on who talks to him, who pressures him. We don't hear any explanations from the president. There are no speeches to the American people explaining these momentous events. There's no serious discussion and debate. So the answer is that it varies by the hour and by the day who's describing U.S. policy. And Truth Social posts are not exactly foreign policy. And this is why the wars continue everywhere, because nothing quite makes sense. It's amateur hour.